Hey everybody, welcome to the Bass Shed Podcast. My name's Ryan Roberts. Alrighty folks, so today on the show I'm talking to Sam Barsh. I met him out here in Los Angeles at the Piano Bar. I know I've mentioned that place on here before. It doesn't exist any longer. It was always a spot that we'd, stop into after our gigs to see who was there. Or if we didn't have a gig, you just go out there and hang, listen to the band. The house band was Miles Mosley and the West Coast Get Down. That included Kamasi Washington, Ryan Porter, Tony Austin, Cameron Graves. Sam would sit in with them from time to time and do the house band gig. Sam made a name for himself in the jazz world, touring with bassist Avishai Cohen and a bunch of others while he lived in New York. Since he's been in L.A., he's been pursuing songwriting. He co-wrote the Aloe Blacc song The Man, which sold 4 million singles worldwide. He also worked on Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly as a keys player and a songwriter. That album won 3 Grammys. He's a brilliant musician, a good friend, and I'm glad we could find the time to connect. And here's my talk with Sam. Check.
Check these nuts.
I'm trying to tighten this up, figure out my podcast format.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I'm just doing it.
But a lot of podcasts it's just some free form shit.
Yeah, that's a lot of what's going on, and I'm okay with that. So I don't know. I've been thinking about this since we finally lined up a time. Thanks for making the time, by the way.
No problem. My time is your time.
I don't know where to start with you. You've covered a lot of stuff. You've been picking up a lot of speed as a songwriter. When did you get into it? And who was that always the thing? Was songwriting your...
Well, I'll give you a little background history. So my first song I wrote when I was 2 on the diaper table.
Oh, yeah.
It was called Grouches Need a Friend. Grouches need a friend. Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Chromatic, too. So I was on some Arnold Schoenberg stuff.
It's progressive.
I think my parents, they got a kick out of it. But they also were like, maybe he should do music. So I started piano lessons. But then I didn't write anything till I was probably 15 was when I first wrote a song.
What age were piano lessons?
4. I started when I was 4. I played classical and just general piano till I was 13 or so, 12, 13. Then I got a jazz teacher. Mm-hmm. There was a jazz studio in the neighboring town from where I grew up. I grew up in Wilmette, Illinois, which is just a couple miles north of Chicago. And between Wilmette and Chicago is a town called Evanston, which is where Northwestern University is. And there was Alan Swain Piano Studios. It was 4 teachers, and it was all jazz. And that's when I got passionate about actually playing. And so I wrote a blues when I was 15. It was a slightly different than a regular blues, but it was a 12-bar form. And then I was just writing jazz stuff, and I ended up writing a lot of original jazz stuff in high school. And my teacher had told me, he was like, look, playing jazz is great. You're doing good at it. Keep it going. He's like, but the only way you'll make real money is writing music. Mm-hmm. And I was like, at the time, I didn't care.
Sure.
I was really passionate about jazz. But he said, you have a talent for melody and stuff. So fast forward a few years, and I started getting into more other styles of music. And I got really into the idea of doing pop stuff. Of course, with a lot of jazz chords.
Yeah.
I got into Justin Timberlake put his first album around then, and there was a lot of interesting chord changes. Mm-hmm. And there was I always was a big fan of the Neptunes, and I got really into Stevie Wonder. And I was like, okay, so you can do pop, but have it be interesting.
Yeah.
Even Thriller and Off the Wall. I mean, a lot of the changes of those songs is super cool. So I started writing songs with a girl who I'd gone to college with named Sarah Versprill. And we did a project, did some shows, recorded an EP. And that was my first released thing. And then I was just doing it. Spent years essentially in all my free time producing and writing stuff. And, you know, some of it was okay, some of it wasn't. But that's when I got passionate. I really got fully into it after I stopped touring with Avishai Cohen, which was around 2006.
Mm-hmm.
When I realized that I loved the jazz world, but I had toured a lot of the places you could tour. Yeah. And I'd done it not with my own project, but like in a trio where I was the piano player. So it was like, I was kind of like, I'm feeling other stuff, and I've seen in ways the apex of like what, not that I was like at the top of the pyramid, but sure. I was playing all the big festivals with a lot of the top other groups, and I was like, this would be my life for the rest of my life, which is not necessarily the goal for 20 years from now. So right. I got into the writing and producing thing.
And Avishai is a very specific sound.
For sure.
Within the jazz thing. So, I mean, even... I that's one of the things I like about him. And I think when you were touring with him, you did an article in Downbeat. They did a write-up on you or something.
By the way, I'll just say Avishai Cohen, the bassist, for people that might not be familiar, because I just said his first name.
Right.
And I know you're familiar.
Right.
But there's bassists listening to this podcast, so they may have deduced.
And not the trumpet player also.
Yeah, just to who's also a friend of mine.
Yeah, we've actually talked about that. We've talked about the name thing.
Oh yeah, there was some discrepancy for a minute, but they're both super cool with each other now.
Where was I going with that? So yeah, I read the article in Downbeat about you, and I hadn't met you yet. This is probably like, I know I was living in LA, so this is probably late 06, early 07.
Yeah, it was 07 or early 08 because the album that it was about came out. I think it came out in late 2007.
That was Continuo.
Oh, it was about.
I don't know.
Continuo.
I'm asking because I thought that was the last.
I had
one
a
you had
Downbeat article about me and my debut album.
Oh, okay.
And that came out in either 07 or early 08.
Okay.
So if it was a Downbeat article about Avishai, it would have been 2006 because I stopped working with him at the end of 2006.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember. But then I met you not too long after that at the piano bar.
We met at the piano bar probably in 2010.
Yeah.
Because I spent a month here before I moved here.
Right, and you were kind of like back and forth-ish.
Yeah, I was technically back and forth for a couple years when I moved here. I was, really pretty much here, but technically I was kind of bi-coastal and just figuring it out.
Sure. What were you... When you were going back to New York, you lived in New York or you lived in Jersey?
Lived in New York, yeah.
What were you doing production out there? Were you doing writing sessions? Were you doing just playing?
So the way I started in the songwriting world, after I did the stuff with Sarah Verspril, who, by the way, now has a group called Pure Bathing Culture that's doing well, and she's a great writer and great artist. I joined up with Curtis Watts, who was like, we're still super like connected soul wise. We don't talk all the time, but he was my production partner, and he was kind of like my big brother figure in New York. And we started producing together. We've been playing a steady gig for this tap dance jam session, which was hilarious in Koreatown in New York. That's a whole other conversation. It was hilarious.
I might want to come back to it.
Oh, okay. It was my first steady gig in New York. It was Sunday nights for 3 years. And then we both started doing some tracks, and actually our first batch of tracks, we worked for probably like a few months. And the first batch of tracks was only saved on one hard drive, and the hard drive failed. So we lost all of it. But truth be told, they were whack. So it was, so like after that, we kind of took a break because it was like, man, it was a downer. But then,
were you guys, what made them whack? Were you just experimenting with
they were just knowing now the quality that stuff is that's actually getting put on major records. It just wasn't there.
Sure.
But it was like our first,
yeah.
He had some success with some other writing stuff. But in terms of like us just producing it ourselves in a small studio, which was just part of his apartment, and using like the technology. He had bands that had been signed to major labels, and they had songs that had gotten like major licenses and toured and stuff. But in terms of just two guys, a keyboard, Pro Tools, and a drum, an MPC, just like putting tracks together, they just weren't that dope.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing.
Sure.
So we got back into it, and it was mainly us as a production team, and then we found different artists to like collaborate with from various ways.
Okay.
Like one, I'm pretty sure it was like a combined effort of like people that we met. Like Curtis found some people. There was a singer who I believe I met at a open mic. I can't remember where we actually met. He lived in the projects over in Fort Greene. Super nice dude, Lex. I can't remember how we met everybody, but it was just like people that we connected with, however. And this was like before even like MySpace. So it was like personal, like no Craigslist. Yeah. And we just put together, it took about a year, and we got 10 songs done. We did it. But that was writing, producing them, adding to the tracks, recording them, getting them mixed, mastered. And after that, I ended up, because I actually had something to play for people, actually ended up getting some production work. And I produced 3 full-length albums in the summer of 2008.
Okay.
One of them was out here, actually. It was called The Years. It was with a lot of LA musicians that we all know now. Yeah. And 2 others were female vocalists. But like after that summer, maybe because of the financial crisis, maybe just because as the nature of the music business, work comes and work goes. Yeah. I didn't have nearly as much like production work coming in as I had that summer. I also had like a couple referrals and like produced single tracks for a couple artists. But then, so my point, I guess, being like during that period, I was doing a lot of collaborative writing with like different writers, but I was never really plugged in like a higher end scene. Right. Like I wasn't plugged into like the writing scene that I'm in now, where it's like there's all these different songwriters that are like full-time writers and producers, and there's a scene of sessions going on. It was all grassroots, and like everybody was kind of on the more like ground level.
Okay. But so during this time, like you're off the road with Avishai, were you still getting those calls? Like dudes who knew you from the jazz world still hitting you up to
I was basically doing jazz gigs, and so I'd also broken into the R&B gigging scene, so I was doing that. I was somehow making a living. I wasn't on another big gig. Yeah. I would get tours, I would get called for sessions. I was surviving. Mm-hmm. Though I did end up going about $20,000 in debt by the time I moved to LA. But that was because I was really trying to be home more and like work on the studio stuff and production stuff. And because I started the group with Jesse Palter, I know called Palter Ego. We started that in 2009. Late 2008, I think we decided that we were going to do it. We'd done some gigs and some writing, and we actually did just a duo, like just real low key show, not really a show, but just like a living room concert at my mom's house. And there was a number of people there who had been seeing me perform for years, and they were like, "This is great. This is like our favorite stuff that you've done." So then was like, you know what? It's probably worth a shot to do it. So between being less on the jazz scene, having less gigs, and also putting money into that project and just money and time into stuff that wasn't making any money, I ended up going pretty hard into debt. But it was for the long game. It ended up working itself out. But I wasn't doing a lot of writing with a bunch of people at that time. Right. For a couple years, it was just me and Jesse.
Yeah,
basically.
I remember that. Yeah. How'd you meet her? I remember you told me at one
point. We met at a jam session in... No. I met her pianist. At that time, he may have been her former pianist because I think he had moved to New York already, but he was her pianist in Michigan.
Okay.
And he had been...
Michael?
No, not Mike.
Okay.
John Nam.
Okay.
She was working with Mike. At that time, she was working with Mike. And I think John was just had his eye out for someone for her to like write songs with or whatever. And so we met and he's like, you should check out this guy, Sam. She hit me on MySpace. I was like, cool, because I'd been looking for somebody to work with.
Yeah.
And she came to New York and like came to my apartment and we played some tunes and then I think she remembers better than me, but I was like, I think I turned to her and was like, you want to write some pop music?
Yeah.
And yeah, we just became tight, became like siblings basically.
Right.
I went and took a trip to Detroit to write with her for a week. And then something happened where Mike had to go out of town or something, and he couldn't make a week's worth of gigs that they had. Because they were gigging like maybe 200 gigs a year or some crazy stuff. They had steadies almost every night.
And for those that don't know Jessie, she's I met her as like a jazz singer.
Yeah, now she has a pop record deal.
Yeah, she's got like I haven't heard the record yet. Is it pop or more of a crossover, jazz influenced?
It's more pop. The best comparison I could make, it's like a Sarah Bareilles type of a sound where there's more live instruments on it.
Yeah.
It's pop, but it's not like Lady Gaga or Selena Gomez pop.
Right.
But it's not all the way adult contemporary either.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
It's great stuff.
But it's also not like a Gretchen Parlato.
No. It's definitely not in the jazz realm.
Yeah.
If anything, there's a couple of cool chords that sneak in.
Okay.
Excuse me. Anyway, so timeline-wise, I wasn't really hooked into like a big writing scene, which admittedly wasn't as popping in New York, although there was very much going on at that time. But that scene had already started to move to Atlanta. Nashville always was vibrant, and LA.
Yeah.
For a time, New York was like the Mecca for urban music, for pop, for a lot of stuff. So anyway, so that brought us both out to LA because we decided that we wanted to pursue the group, and since we didn't live in the same city, it was like, where should we go? And I think I was ready to be out of New York in my like back of my brain. I wasn't thinking it yet, but we both visited LA, which is when you and I met for like a month in May of 2010, and was like, yo, we could do this. This is the spot.
Yeah.
So songwriting wise, still when I got out here, Jessie and I were pretty much just writing together for the first couple years. I'd produced a couple rappers, and I actually produced 4 songs for Norah Jones's like rap side project.
Oh, really?
Which never really went anywhere, but they did release a video of one of the songs.
She did like 2 records with like the coffee shop jazz sound. Then she did like a kind of a country thing, didn't she?
Yeah, and then she did an album with Danger Mouse.
Okay. And
then she did a like more jazz type of like a trio record almost.
Okay.
Which was dope. She's a true artist.
Yeah.
And she made such a massive mark with her first 2 albums that she can kind of do whatever.
Sure.
But a couple years down the line after Jessie and I finished an EP, or we really did 2 full-length albums and an EP. And it got to the point where we just financially, it was like we'd either have to invest in a publicity campaign and hope it drew more interest, or do like a bunch of grassroots touring, which neither of us was really in the position to do. We just had to kind of fly with what was more working. And right around that time, DJ Khalil opened the studio, which we're currently at now. And he was like, yo, Barsh, I'm going to need you around a lot more if you want to be around. Like, we got a lot going on. The studio just opened. Because I'd met him a year or 2 before, but we'd gotten together a handful of times. But he was transitioning from his old studio to here, and I was doing my other stuff. So we weren't locked in. But he brought me in on the first thing he was working on here was Aloe Blacc's album.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up co-writing The Man, which was a huge song.
Yeah.
And that opened a lot of doors in terms of just us getting sessions together and us working together a lot. And
how many writers were on that?
4, but also 4 people wrote the song, but we interpolated. There's like a line from Elton John's song. So Elton John and Bernie Taupin are also technically writers on the song. And they have a pretty substantial percentage of the song.
Yeah.
But look, they could have taken the whole they could have said, screw you.
Sure.
So I'm fine with that whole situation. So there's a total of 6 writers.
Okay.
But yeah, so then since then I have started writing with a lot of different people.
Yeah.
Tons of sessions, and you have to find a balance between working on stuff that say you're getting paid to produce versus stuff that you're doing on spec to try to get on big records. Mm-hmm. And it's cool.
Do you still find that you've been on some big records? Mm-hmm. How many number ones have you written on?
1 number 1 single and 4 or 5 number 1 albums.
So now you still find you're kind of auditioning even
Always.
with your creds?
Yeah. I mean, I get in a lot of rooms, thankfully, but it's still always a challenge. And most of the bigger sessions I get in are still through my team of people that I work with, Khalil, Greg Johnson, who's my publisher. And so, like, I do get calls from a number of people, but it's still, I would say it's still, it's always a challenge to get in to certain sessions, or just, I would just say, even if you're in sessions, it's just always a battle to get a song placed on a major record.
Sure.
And it's an even bigger battle to get it as a single.
Yeah.
A lot of things have to go your way. It has to be good, and a lot of things have to go your way.
Yeah. What's kind of your process when you're in the writing room? Like, is it working with that many people who are also strong writers? What's that room feel like? Like, is there egos? Is there someone always trying to play alpha in it because maybe they have solid credits or something? Or is everybody in it for the nature of turning out something that's
pretty much the latter?
Okay.
Everyone's in it for the sake. Sometimes there's actually been a couple situations where I've worked with people that are too alpha always.
Yeah.
And they just end up getting attritioned out of the scene. I don't know if that's the right word, but
sure.
They get canceled because it's not worth it.
Right.
The best people come in and just try to do a great record.
Yeah.
If the artist is there and if you're working with a lead artist themselves, you got to go with what they're feeling.
Of course.
So they're, by default the alpha, but some of them will be more open than others. Some will be not necessarily decisive. Like, you might start something, they'll be like, oh, let's go on to something else.
Yeah.
And you got to do it.
Do you have a preference? Do you like when the artist is there? Do you like when it's just kind of a collaborative kind of round table? And you're just
I'd rather the
ideas?
artist be there, because if you're playing the game of, well, it does depend on the artist, but almost all the time I would say it's better for the artist to be there, because when you're playing the game of trying to come up with songs and have them pitched and end up on an album, an artist being in the room when something is created, they're always going to have more attachment to something like that than if it was submitted to them.
Yeah.
So your chances of landing the song are better. Plus, you get to connect with the artist. Like, there's the business angle of trying to get the song placed.
Yeah.
But also the artistic angle, you get to connect with the artist. You get to help them shape their sound with them there. Mm-hmm. And that's a cool feeling, because that's really the art of it. Art is intersecting commerce.
Sure.
At any point, whether you're playing at a bar or you're writing a number 1 record or you're producing a show for TV with music, it's all earning money via creating art. So that intersection just has to be acknowledged. And while, achieving the commerce part, you can still create a lot of good art. It just, you have to be strategic when you're in the game of trying to get songs on records.
Yeah. You do you feel like you're continually reinventing yourself, or what are you listening to that gives you this kind of bandwidth of ideas to pull from? My first into you as a writer was the Palter Ego stuff, and everything had such a strong character to it. So if it was like, I forgot the titles of the songs, but I think there's like a 12/8 tune that was kind of old soul changes and feel, and it was very much that. And then there were some tunes that were dance driven, and it was very much just that. Like everything was, we're playing by these rules now.
Yeah, we did have a schizophrenic sound, but I think above anything, we were interested in songwriting.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would take the inspiration. To answer your question, I have a lot of influences. I've played a lot of different styles.
Sure.
And I'm a very song by song guy. Like there's certain albums that I think are just amazing albums front to back. Most stuff in the modern era, I'll usually just cherry pick the songs that I like.
Sure.
And I'm not even mad that people aren't really as album oriented now. I'm just.
Do you think that's an iTunes thing, that like when individual downloads became possible and popular, that the art of releasing an album as one piece of art versus just the singles?
Yeah.
Changed?
I also think that the albums that are amazing albums front to back, it's not like every album from the 60s or 70s was like that.
No.
There's just the few classic ones,
Yeah.
and they still exist.
Sure. What are some of those records for you?
Definitely Off the Wall and Thriller.
Yeah.
Steely Dan Asia. It's funny, but Billy Joel's Greatest Hits, it's not an album, but I used to blast that shit so hard. But there's a couple of Billy Joel records that I would put in that category. I would put most of the Beatles albums in that category. But you're talking about the top of the top people. Yeah. Stevie Wonder Talking Book was probably the Stevie album I listened to the most. Billie Holiday, Lady in Satin. I'm a person that's like listened to certain albums just over and over. Larry Young, Unity.
Okay. Like I listened to 10 Sumner's Tales by Sting, like I don't even know how many times, and it's always all the way through.
Yeah.
Like that's the only way I kind of know those tunes is by what's before and after them. Like I'll hear them out in a bar or restaurant, and I can already hear the next tune, on the record.
Yeah, and that's a classic for you. There's others, but I mean, those are the ones that first come to mind.
Yeah.
And it's like, those are like some of the dopest albums ever.
Yeah.
So not every album has to go to that standard. A lot of times an artist will just do one song. They'll just catch that vibe and it'll be a dope song. And I'm cool with that. So I end up cherry picking, but stylistically it is varied. Mm-hmm. So if I'm in a session, I'm pretty good at going with what influence, like if somebody plays me a couple references or say I want to do something like this, I'm good with going with that, especially if I can select a sound that works like that. If you put me on Rhodes or piano and just ask me to go, I can do like almost any style, but I might, if there's nothing going on or you don't give me any influences, I might come up with stuff that's like within a certain range, just the shit that I like go to.
Okay.
But if you give me a little bit of an influence, I can go in a bunch of different directions.
Yeah.
So I think when trying to go in a certain direction or find new inspiration, it comes from listening to some different influences, which like when I work with DJ Khalil, he always will like play a couple things just for a reference and or just new sounds. Coming up with, like, I just got a couple new keyboards because it's been a while and I just wanted to like get some fresh shit, and like I have a lot of plug-in sounds which I love, but it's good to mix up those with like an actual piece of equipment that's more tactile, where you can just tweak it right there and you may come up with a sound that you'll never find again.
Sure.
So that's how I get different influences, and also just different energies in the room. if you're with 4 people or 3 people or 2 people, and your energy with them at that moment in time is gonna bring something that wouldn't have come in another, even, necessarily 8 hours later or with one different person.
Right. You typically work with the same songwriters that you guys got a vibe, and it's like I know here there's a bunch of studios here in the building, and this is your crew.
Yeah, I work a lot with the crew of people at the studio and others, but even that being said, if we do a session together and it's not just us, like people here, there's usually at least one person that's not part of the team that's here.
Okay.
Whether it's a top-line songwriter, another producer, another musician who's a writer, a visiting vocalist or rapper, and they'll bring their whole energy into it too.
Yeah. Do you like working? Do you like working? That sounds like a dumb way to ask the question, but the electronic music thing, working. How much of the writing is done kind of in the box, and how much of it is written on an acoustic piano, where the melody line is being actually composed outside of equipment?
I would say
recording equipment.
The way I work is generally from scratch.
Okay.
Now, I don't have an acoustic piano physically in this room, but a lot of times I will write just a piano and vocalist. But usually, at some point during the initial writing session, production will be started. So,
Okay.
say there's me and a vocalist who writes lyric melody.
Yeah.
We'll start coming up with an idea. It might just start it with some chords on like a piano or electric piano sound, or just another synth sound, but it's like just playing chords.
Yeah.
They'll start writing lyric melody. While they're doing that, I'll record that into a session, start doing some drums, start adding bass parts, other elements. So it's like a combined thing at the same time.
It's all working in real time together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now sometimes I do this, and a lot of other producers do this. They'll have tracks ready.
Right.
And they'll just play it, and someone will pick something they like. Now, because I'm not as much of like track guy where I just sit around and make beats all day, but I do a lot of instrumentals. Like I'll basically do the whole beat except for the drums.
Okay.
I've been doing a lot of that and sending them to other producers. Then they'll send me drums. So now, because a lot of guys they'll just make beats all day.
Yeah.
So I give them, instrumental material either to sample and chop up or just put through as is and just put drums to it.
Okay.
So some of these guys just send me, beats all the time. This producer named Snowball, who I work with a lot, he's been sent me like probably 70 beats of stuff with my instrumentals.
Now one guy turning out that much content of one specific thing, how much of it sounds like it's borrowed from one another? Like, is there commonalities in it? Where it's just like,
he's using all different pieces of music that I send him, which are different.
Okay.
And
so he's responding to what?
Yeah, he's mainly adding drums and some bass stuff. He's not adding any other instrumental shit.
Okay.
So the style of the drums is similar, but each beat is a little different, and the instrumental is totally different.
Right.
So it doesn't all sound the same. It's within one stylistic realm. Like that stuff is much more of a trap vibe. But that type of drum sound can be super gutter rap. It can be, R&B pop radio stuff. It could be even just regular pop. So basically what I'm saying is now I do have a lot of beats lying around that can be played for people. So I've done a couple sessions recently where I just played tracks for people, and they were like, oh yeah, I'll mess with that one.
Okay.
And then that makes my job easier in that session because I'll really just be facilitating I'll really be facilitating what the lyric melody writer wants to do.
Yeah.
And just honestly, I'll be like, I can be doing other shit while they're writing, and then I'll record their vocals, help shape it. I also do lyric melody too, so I can help. I like to stay in my lane and let people like do their thing, but I can always help fill in words or do melody stuff.
I never knew if you did that. Were you doing that with Jesse, or was
Yeah,
she mainly?
we both did it. I mean, if you're gonna say more often I was doing chords and more often she was doing lyric melody, but honestly, excuse me, on almost every song, both of us played some role in both.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was some where
musician that knows changes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She'll come. A lot of times she'll come because we still write together. She'll come up and be like, she'll have a song, but she'll be like, I want to change some of the chords. A lot of times I'd end up writing a bridge, like the melody and the chords, or there was a couple things where I did most of it and then she came in and added. There was some stuff where she did almost all of it and then I came in and added something. It was always a collaboration, but sometimes it was like totally like 50-50 and sometimes it was just like a piece. One of us added a piece here or there.
What do you guys still does Palter Ego still exist, but just
it's not I would say it's dormant.
Okay.
But she has a solo record deal now and she has her project, but we co-wrote 3 songs on that album.
Okay.
And I've brought her in on some songwriting stuff for other people. But we occasionally get called to do a gig together of some of that music. And yeah, we've been writing. We've written a few songs for her project. We've written some stuff for other people. And I've been actually doing some shows with her because she's been doing promo stuff for her new album.
Yeah.
We're homies for life, for sure. Yeah.
So you got 3 Grammys?
I don't technically have a statue. I always make a point to say my work has won 3 Grammys.
Okay. But I thought you can, like, if you're on a Grammy record, don't you have to pay for your statue?
The statue, if you officially win, they give it to you. You have to pay for the plaques, the certificates.
Oh, I see.
And you can only get one if you were a part of the album, and they like verify it with the label, and they have to like.
So then what's the deal? Because like, To Pimp a Butterfly won 3, right?
It won 1, and the song I won 2.
Okay.
Which was on To Pimp a Butterfly, but it came out the Grammy year prior.
Okay.
Just a single at that time.
So then what's the thing? Why didn't you get the statue?
Oh, because I was a songwriter and a keyboardist. I was a songwriter on 1 song and a keyboardist on 2 songs on the album. You have to have... At the time, songwriters and musicians weren't eligible at all for an album award.
Okay.
Now, if you wrote more than 33% of an album, you could win a Grammy if it wins Album of the Year, but not any other
Oh, wow. Not
award.
any other category.
No.
Okay.
And I wasn't a songwriter on I was a keyboardist.
Okay.
I worked on it from scratch from the beginning. We actually tried to write something for because Kendrick wanted it to be like he was referencing Isley Brothers' That Lady. He wanted us to write something original that sounded like it, and we spent 3 days doing that, and then he was like, you know what, we need to just use That Lady. So then we came back and we replayed it like exact according to the record.
Okay, but you didn't sample it.
No, that's the thing. So he called us back. He's like, let's do That Lady, but we'll do it.
Okay.
And some people, it's funny, when the song came out, Pitchfork and a couple other snobby music magazines said that it was a sample. So I was like, okay, we fooled Pitchfork. They thought it was actually a sample. And I just used a piano sound from my computer. That's not even a real piano.
Oh, really?
Contact upright piano, baby. You can't beat it.
Yeah. What so your work's been on Grammy Award, you're on the Billboards, the Grammys. What's the what would be the like, yeah, this is it, like, you know, not like the end game, because then that sounds like you're done.
Yeah, there isn't one. I mean, I've had a #1 pop single. It was a #1 in the UK, The Man. It was top 10 here. But you have a #1, and then it's not #1 anymore. And if you go by that, you're gonna, set yourself up for a lot of anger,
Sure,
or disappointment. So
it's like having a dream gig and then the gig's over. It's like, now what?
Exactly. So my goal is to keep trying to have big stuff, but also meaningful stuff, meaningful work. Raise my profile to the point where, not in an ego way, but for a business and creative sense,
Sure.
that a Sam Barsh something has a certain level of value where I could like own a home, have some money away, have a family, you know, take care of my wife and live in a way where I could set up a retirement situation.
Sure.
You know, be financially comfortable.
Right.
I don't need to be Bill Gates. I wouldn't mind having a few mil. And the thing is, I
don't know if anybody would be like, yeah, no, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Like, you know?
But I have to earn it.
Sure.
I wouldn't want to win the lottery. I guess or get an inheritance.
Right.
That's like, I actually was talking to my therapist today. I do go to therapy. I feel that it's an important part of, you know, for me and for a lot of people. There was like something where we were talking about like inheritances, and I was like, even if I had an inheritance to get, I would probably be too stubborn to take it, or I would put it into maybe buying a home or something, but it means more to me to earn the money.
Sure.
So I guess the end game is to keep doing what I'm doing, have it be successful, both because you want your stuff to be successful, but also so then my brand has value, and then I can be somebody that gets tasked to make decisions, be in charge of projects, get more production stuff, executive producing. And, you know, I could even see myself running a band of a TV show, like doing what the Roots do, where they do that and they still do records and they tour. But I really like, I'm not going to say I love the responsibility of being in charge of stuff, but I can handle it.
I've always liked the gigs I've done with you. I always like you as a band leader.
Thank you.
Because you always have a really strong vision of what you want, but you're not a dick about it.
Never.
No, but you know exactly what you want and what you want where, and you're cool at communicating that in a very like, this is what we're doing. Do whatever you want, you know, outside of that, but make sure that thing's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you do side man work too. So
for sure.
Working with the leader who's got a strong vision, it's amazing.
It makes it good, especially if you're a good sideman. So you got to hire people that are going to listen to you. But I would say I did briefly pursue being a solo jazz artist. I put on an album like we were talking about in 2007. Did some minor touring. I had a manager at that time who had approached me about managing me.
Oh, wow.
But I was also at the time where I was doing a lot of the songwriting production stuff, and I realized I didn't love being a touring band leader.
Okay.
Now I could handle it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm the type of person that wants to be always in the spotlight. I just don't know if that at the time that wasn't me. I really like helping other people shine. I like having my moments when they're there. Mm-hmm. But I also understand that making a brand requires you to be more of a person that's at least known, if not always in the spotlight. But back to the end game. The end game is to be in that place where I can be tapped to make some decisions, make some more money, and give opportunities to other people.
Sure.
Like I just MD'd, we were talking about this before the podcast started. Lupe Fiasco performed his entire album Food and Liquor live. I ended up being a replacement MD, so I didn't hire most of the people. I ended up hiring 2 people that that had to cancel. But I was in charge of 15 musicians. I ended up getting a budget to get charts made, so I got to hire a couple of people that I do a great job to make charts. Yeah. And delegate and run everything. It was the biggest show I've MD'd. It was 2,400 people sold out.
Okay.
And
where was that at?
The Novo. It used to be the Nokia.
Okay, yeah.
Club Nokia.
Right.
And it was cool. I enjoyed it. You know, it was pressure, but I work well under chaos and pressure. Okay. It's not a preferred method of working, but I wasn't like nervous or stuff like that. I was a little anxious right when we started, right when I was about to accept the gig, but then.
Okay. Did you feel any, because you were a sub MD, were any of the band members that were there that the old MD brought in, did they throw you any vibe or anything?
No, because the gig, all he had done was gotten them to agree to the fee.
Okay.
They hadn't scheduled rehearsals.
Okay.
They hadn't met at all. I mean, they knew each other, but they hadn't met as a band.
Right.
And I knew 90% of the people he had called,
killing.
and we were cool, and they all respected me, and I talked to everybody.
Yeah.
And it was a good vibe. I didn't step into something where they had done a bunch of shows, and then I was just like Johnny substitute teacher vibe.
Right.
I basically, after the band was booked, the other MD had to sub out for legitimate reasons, and they hadn't even confirmed all the logistics or the budget yet. So I was there still like towards the beginning of the process. And my point is that it felt good to be, responsible, but also to be, in a way, responsible for getting a bunch of great musicians work.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Sure.
And I like, providing work, but I also like providing a challenge for people. There was a lot of younger musicians in the group. And it was cool to see guys that probably haven't done a major tour yet work with like a major artist. Yeah. And a lot of them probably will do more of that. So that's end game for me. Keep the profile going. Keep making big records as a producer and writer and keyboardist. That's my thing this year is embrace the triple threat. A lot of people say once you become a writer and producer, you shouldn't do gigs anymore. I
wanted to ask you about that.
Go ahead.
I didn't have a question lined up, but that topic, you're spending so much time in here working in the machine as this all operates. What's it feel like when you actually go out and play again? I saw that you have some dates coming up with Brenna Whitaker, Joel at the, where you guys are?
At the Blue Whale.
Yeah.
So when The Man came out and we were having sessions here like close to 5 days a week with different artists and writers, I was playing a lot less. And I'd saved some money. I'd sold my apartment in New York, and then I was making good money just from royalties.
Yeah.
And so I didn't need to gig. And then I was kind of in that mentality too. It was like, yeah, I'm not, I'm a writer producer now.
Right.
But then I realized that, and it's not like I wasn't doing any gigs, but I was just not. I was turning down a lot of shit. Not to be a dick, just I was here, in the studio. And then, well, first of all, you realize that most records nowadays don't make much money. Mm-hmm. Even an album cut on a number one album that goes platinum, it's it might earn you a few grand. If it doesn't get on commercial radio or get licensed a lot, streaming just doesn't pays hardly anything for songwriters. Mm-hmm. So was
that a bit of a wake up call when you experienced that? Was that like now you're seeing behind the curtain and like, oh, this is reality?
It was a wake up call, but also when I started selling downloads was the major way that people were, when I started doing songwriting, people still bought CDs, then it converted to buying. So if an album did well, it was still, there would be some people pirating it, but it was selling copies, whether it was digital copies or
streaming wasn't a thing.
No, it wasn't a thing. So it was almost like something you couldn't anticipate.
Right.
And now I'm very into advocating, like, so that people know the deal, that people know what a stream pays. And a lot of people fight to get cuts on, say, I actually wrote an article for Grammy.com that it's not out yet. We're still, they want to like edit it down. Okay. But I use the example of a Fifth Harmony like cut. Mm-hmm. They're not together now, but at the time, or they're just a good example. They're a big pop group that every writer is trying to like get a cut on that album. If you get a song on that album, it's like people are like, oh, you got a Fifth Harmony cut. They do song camps for them. All the big writers come and Everyone's trying to get on the album. And I use an example of 7 songs on their album had roughly 50 million streams or less each. And so you do the math, and with the royalty rate that the average royalty rate that Spotify pays is like 0.00037 of a dollar per stream. It was, if a song streams 100 million times, the whole song makes $37,500.
Right.
And then you divide that by an average of 4 or 5 writers per song, and then most of them are going to have a publishing deal, so their publisher will take 50%. So you're talking a couple grand for a song on a number 1 album that goes 2 times platinum.
Sure.
So knowing that, and seeing it in myself, the royalty statements, you realize, unless you have tons of singles that are on the radio, and because commercial radio still pays well, and licensed, you're not going to make a ton of money writing in this day and age on your average, even if you're getting a lot of good placements. Mm-hmm. So financially, I started gigging again more, but also just in my soul, I'm like, you know what? Fuck the mentality that you have to be one or the other. Yeah. I just don't buy it. And if people want to think that way, I enjoy not thinking the same way as other people. Sure. I like discomforting norms. I like making people that are too stuck on societal norms a little out of their comfort zone. Yeah. And so I'm like, fuck it, man. I don't know if I can curse on this podcast, but I'm going to be the guy who's out gigging and writing in big writing sessions and producing young, upcoming artists, doing stuff for big people, all of it. I'm going to embrace that. I can MD a show one week, and then on Monday through Wednesday, we're hosting a writing camp with all Warner Chappell writers. They're going to be sending some super established songwriters, and all the producers are people that have produced for major artists, had platinum singles. And then also that week, I'm going to be leaving the song camp and going to rehearsals because I'm playing with an Armenian pop star. And I'm just doing keyboards on that.
Yeah, is those in-town gigs?
Yeah, it's an in-town thing.
Okay.
And I have no shame about it. Or I've left sessions with established writers, and I'm going and to go play a solo piano gig. Mm-hmm. And I'm cool with it. Keeps my chops up. You never know who you're going to meet at a gig. The thing is, most of my connects from this world have initiated from people I know from the live scene. Right. Even you introduced me to Rocky, right? Who I ended up doing the Kendrick stuff with.
Yeah. How's he doing? You still see him?
I haven't seen him in a little while. We still text and stuff. He's starting his own team.
Oh, great.
He has a guitarist who's a writer that he signed.
Is his brother still in New York? Because his brother's a bass player.
His brother's a great bass player, yeah. I've hired him the last 2 times I've gone to New York. Okay. I've hired him on bass. But yeah, we met through the live scene. You knew Rocky from playing at church, right? Mm-hmm. And then you introduced me and Rocky. We did a couple sessions, lost touch for a couple years. And then actually I ran into him here.
Oh, dope.
Because he played drums on The Man.
Oh, really?
And he was sitting in the lobby, and it was like, oh, what's up, man? And then we were like, oh, we should work again. And then we started doing some ideas for Kendrick.
The last time I saw him, I was dropping off my bass because his brother was in town. And he hit me up to see if his brother could borrow my upright. So I remember I ran into you there at the studio out on the west side.
Oh, yeah.
That was the last time I saw him.
He may have used that for the Kendrick stuff. Your bass has been
my bass is on way more records than I am. Ben Williams borrows it when he's in town.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. So my bass has,
got to get some credits.
My bass has them all. It's on some great records. That's funny.
Anyway, so meeting people from the live scene, it's you never know who you're going to connect with. And that's a lane I have that a lot of writers and producers don't. Most of them aren't good enough musicians to even do a gig.
Really?
Yeah. and that's no shame on them.
No,
it's like
different skill set.
Great at what they are doing, and a lot of producers can like play keys to like do the stuff on records, or like I know one producer I work with a lot is a great producer. He can play guitar and he can do what is needed, and he plays with soul.
Yeah.
But he can't do a gig with somebody.
Okay.
Like he's not going to be able to like learn 8 songs, do a rehearsal, have a pedal rig, dial shit in.
Right.
You know. So I can be out doing gigs and make connects that way that can transfer here. Yeah. And so I'm kind of trying to help bridge that in general, those worlds.
And then that goes back to what you're saying, just creating opportunities for musicians.
Exactly. And I am a musician at heart, you know. It doesn't have to preclude me, being a producer doesn't have to preclude me from doing gigs.
Right.
And being a musician doesn't have to preclude me from being a legitimate writer producer.
Sure.
One thing I do run into is that a lot of musicians on the scene want to be writers and producers, and a lot of them, as amazing as they are as musicians, a lot of them, their writing and production just isn't that dope. It's a whole other skill set.
Yeah.
I mean, I spent 10 years doing it before I got a major song placement. And still as a producer, I'm still working at that, you know. I've always been a better writer than a producer. I have a talent, like a melodic talent that is just a talent.
Is that kind of natural? Because when you were talking about making the shift to study jazz piano, the way you improvise is really unique. Like, it is not this kind of stamp jazz school, you know, where you got like a little bit of McCoy, a little bit of this guy. Like you definitely have your own thing in the way you improvise, and it's these long story arc narratives. So yeah, you do have the melodic thing. Is that just natural? That's just how you hear it?
Well, the way I describe it, as you know, in jazz, basically you practice, and I was practicing, 5-6 hours a day for years. You practice to unlock what's in your head. So I don't say this arrogantly. I just say it as I always had a penchant for melody. And even when I was in high school, when I'd write jazz songs, I'd notice that like people would be like singing the melody, and they'd be like, "Yo, your stuff's melodic. It's dope." And my teacher had told me that I had a penchant for melody, and he was not a teacher that was like a smoke blower.
Right.
Like he was like, "You need to get your shit together." Yeah, like it was like, "You need to do this. You're not good in that." He wasn't an ass, but it was like, so it's not like I was just getting some like generic positive feedback. Right. It was like, this is actually something you have a talent at. So unlocking it and harnessing it into knowing how to be a good songwriter in terms of structure and like lyrically, like writing stuff that makes sense to other people besides yourself. Yeah. It's taken time to hone those skills, but I feel like I have talent in them. As a producer, I don't know if I would say I'm a talented producer. Like I've had to really stretch the way I hear, and like
from what to what? Like what's that?
Like that sonically.
Okay.
Like if you go to Didier and to DJ Khalil, the two of the producers that are in this studio, the way they cook up something, just sonically, it just sounds amazing. Now, they've also both worked very hard, right, but I would say those two are very talented producers that have also worked hard. I've been producing for a long time, and I've had a lot of people tell me, not in a mean way, but like, look, you're a dope keyboardist, you're a dope writer, the production is, it's not there, or like... Yeah. Or like either is as directly as that or in so many words, basically. But I really enjoy producing, and I have gotten to the point where I've done some stuff that I know is on the level. Okay. But my average thing, if I'm just doing it myself, it's not always there. Yeah. And that's actually been cool for me to be collaborating with other producers because maybe between me and somebody else, we can have a track that's like up here.
Right.
But I know, and this is just a very honest assessment of myself, I know that that's not a talent that I was born with.
Okay.
Is hearing the whole picture and being, because a producer has to hear the whole record and you have to hear it at a higher level.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people's tracks I hear, they'll think it's dope and I'll be like, the sounds aren't that dope. The drum sounds aren't that dope. There's some element missing. Mm-hmm. I've been learning through, thankfully, working with producers that are way better than me, how those elements come about.
Okay.
Whether it's actually physically something in the track or it's just the vibe of it and like knowing how certain sounds fit together.
Is this something you just kind of watch them do their thing, like fly on the wall style, or are you actively like, yo, what's going on here?
It's watching and listening.
Yeah.
You know, because some of it's technical stuff, like knowing how to use effects. I'm very proficient at using DAWs, like Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton. I know how to edit very well. I know how to stack vocals. I know how to use effects. I know how to make a good vocal chain. I know how to automate, and I'm constantly learning more.
Are you into mixing at all? Do you produce and mix?
Yeah, I mix. I mean, I've mixed some stuff that's been released.
Okay.
And I mixed the Palter Ego, all those instrumentals, which is most of what we got licensed.
Yeah.
But I don't call myself a mixer.
Are you into that? Like, I know a lot of guys that do production and mixing, but they lean more towards one or the other.
I'm not a mixer for hire generally.
Yeah.
Anything I'm producing, I mix as I go.
Okay.
So at the end, if we like the mix, sometimes a client will just keep it.
Yeah.
Like I just worked with Harry Mack on his last album, rapper. And I had produced one of the songs.
I haven't seen him in years.
He's doing well, yeah. So I produced a song with him. We've done a few tracks together. And he hit me. He's like, yo, I want to use this one. Go for mine. I want to use it for the album. And we had just done the track one day. And I had always thought, oh, we need to revisit it or whatever. But a lot of times you do a beat, do the vocal, and then sit on it and see. So Harry thought it was cool. So he's like, we'll get it mixed. Sent it to a mixer. Came back. The mix wasn't right. And this mixer mixed the rest of his album, and it sounded dope. Okay. So I was like, I don't know what's up, but like, there was just the bass was not right. And so Harry was like, why don't I come and we'll try to mix it together. Yeah. Now, what ended up happening is we added more elements and edited shit that I would have done if I knew we were going to release it.
Yeah.
And then also ended up mixing as we went. And we were both really happy with that mix. And that's the mix on the album.
Okay.
And that's how my mixes tend to go. It's like it's almost there by the time the production is pretty much done.
Yeah.
And then I'll just tweak and finish it. And
so then it's a similar process to your writing style where it's all just happening together in real time, working your way through it.
I guess what I'm saying is, in terms of not being a mixer for hire, I'm not the guy that's going to say your trick shit's fully produced, send it to me and I'll mix it.
Right.
It's a process. And so if I'm producing something, and at the end of that process, my mix is what we like, then go with it.
Yeah.
But I do know the things, a lot of the things that mixers do, like in terms of automating effects and volume stuff, pan schemes, the type of EQing that people do. Now, by no means am I an expert. When you go to the heavy mixers, you'll see they'll be automating like certain frequencies and side chaining certain frequencies at certain times.
Right.
So that's
I know that stuff exists, and I'm done. Like,
yeah,
that's it. Like, all right, cool.
It's like a different galaxy. You can see it.
Cool,
kind
that
of.
happens.
Yeah.
I'll let you guys deal with that.
So but again, a lot of it's also just a feel and ear thing.
Yeah.
If it sounds good and feels good, the technical stuff behind that doesn't matter anymore.
Sure.
But yeah, so to answer your question from a couple minutes ago, I've learned a lot from observing the technical stuff, but it's also just listening and being around stuff. I would say you can always, you can hear any record that was ever released pretty much online.
Yeah.
But and then you can try to compare your stuff to that. Mm-hmm. But there's another thing of hearing stuff while it's created, or like hearing it in the studio like before it's released, and hearing, say you're in a meeting with like an A&R or an artist and you're hearing a bunch of stuff that's not out yet, but this is the stuff that's making it even to the consideration stage, and you're hearing it before it's like mixed for radio and compressed for like streaming stuff. And that's been where I've really learned a lot, to be like, okay, so it's got to sound on this level to get to that point where it's even in the consideration for being on the album.
Right, to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
You got to hit this.
And when you hear a bunch of shit back to back, you're like, okay. And so since I enjoy producing and I think it's a great way to create and again have a little more of a say-so and stuff, I've kept pursuing, doing it.
Yeah.
And, but knowing, like, I've worked as hard at producing as a lot of people. Some people are just never going to be great. Some people are so talented that when they work hard, their stuff is just like the best stuff you've ever heard.
Yeah.
And I'm getting there, but I'm in the middle somewhere.
Okay.
I'm not a no talent.
Right.
But I'm not a person that naturally heard stuff on the level that when you heard their tracks, they're like, there's something about that that's amazing.
Now, as far as production and having an identity of production or even writing style, do you feel like you're doing a lot of work that necessarily doesn't have the Barsh stamp of sound?
I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about serving a song, serving the music. It'll probably have my stamp somewhere.
Sure.
I do try to sneak a little cool chord in here and there in stuff I'm doing, in the pop stuff. I like to stretch people's ears a bit.
Yeah.
But I won't force it.
Sure.
But I do always like when I'm working with like a pop artist and like I'll throw a little cool chord in there and they'll be into it and it'll stay in the song.
Yeah. So it's not it's not that you're trying to change the course of the music at all, but it's got some personal.
It's just going to have that anyway.
Yeah.
If I'm playing on something or writing it in some way or producing it, it'll have a piece of me in it. Whether whether it's obvious or it's very subtle. My goal is not to have everyone know that I produce something. I think it's actually a sign of a good producer, of a great producer, if you can serve the music in such a way that it's transparent in terms of you might not know who produced it.
Sure.
And I think that's cool too.
Sure. I think as coming from the session musician idea, like there's dudes like Jamerson, right? Who's like, okay, well, yeah.
Yeah.
He does the one thing. But then there's dudes like Pino who are always kind of reinventing himself to just be non-existent.
Yeah.
But he can absolutely crush it, and he's doing all kinds of different stuff all the time.
But you can see him do a gig where he's playing whole notes.
Yeah.
And that's what the music calls for.
Right, and he's doing that. But it's still very much him, and it's his discernment that led him to make that call. So in that sense, it's personal. Yeah,
a lot of the heavy studio people, when all the records were being made with studio musicians, you have to read the liner notes a lot of times to realize who it was.
Yeah.
Even if you know who they are.
Right. I've been going back and doing that a lot. It's fascinating. I haven't been. What do you check out? Like, you're part of releasing new music. So what are you listening to when you listen to new music?
Well, I take a lot of influence from what other people tell me to listen to in terms of like if we're in a session. Okay. So I'd be like, yo, we want to use this as an influence, and then I save it on my Spotify and I'll go back to stuff. I listen to KCRW and I listen to like pop radio here and there, just to know what's on the radio.
Yeah.
I'll listen to playlists.
Okay.
And then I go back to classic records that I love too. But I always am learning music for something. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what my time is taken up with is learning the music that I have to perform.
Right. It's for work. So like recreationally,
I do listen to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks. But I still do listen to a lot of music. It'll be random. I'll just go on a whim and some song I have in my head, I'll put it in Spotify and I'll let it play and it'll play other stuff.
Right.
I hadn't listened to Chris Dave's album, his newish album that came out, and so I was like listening to that today.
The one from like 3 years ago is the one with my bass that Ben's on.
Oh, sick.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to that one.
On.
I listened to the Drumheads one.
Okay.
I had maybe heard a track or two, and then I was like, you know what? I need to give this album a full listen. And that's a nice thing about Spotify and streaming is you can just do it. And I've been listening to the Armenian pop stuff that I have to play next week, which is cool because it's got a lot of ethnic influences in it. There's some like weird meter bars in there, and like.
Have you had to like go make those sounds? Are they sounds that are kind of naturally exist, or do you have to build the sounds that you're going to be using?
I was building sounds, and then I found out we're doing the gig to tracks and playing over the tracks. Okay. So now I'm just finding sounds that are going to blend well.
Gotcha.
But my sounds were more in the pop realm.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the like the sonically. There's also an oud player and a darbuka, I think it is, like a wind instrument player on the gig, and guitar. So, and another keys player.
Oh wow.
So my role was really going to be more of the synth layer shit.
Okay.
So now the fact that we're playing with the tracks is going to mean I have even more flexibility, I guess, sound wise.
Right. You
so
don't have to nail the sounds from his recording.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through and like we already did one rehearsal and we did 7 songs and I hadn't gotten I knew that rehearsal was just gonna be me coming up with stuff on the spot, and I came up with some cool sounds, and so I'll just do some of that on my own and some of it in the rehearsal.
Killing. What dates you got coming up that you want to plug?
I'm playing with Ben Shepherd Saturday at the Blue Whale. Playing.
Who else is in that band?
That is
Mancini.
Yeah, dope. On Vibes. I forget the drummer. I don't think we've met before, but I'm sure he's dope. And Wednesday with Joel Fromm at the Blue Whale, which is Dave Robert and Rick Montalbano. And I don't know if they hired another horn, but I know it's us 4. I'm going to do my own show at Sam First in L.A. on April 20th, 4/20.
Nice.
And
what material are you doing? I mean, your stuff.
Just my stuff. It'll be trio. I've done a couple shows there. And
now that place is primarily acoustic jazz.
Yeah, I just play the acoustic piano.
Okay. And it's acoustic upright bass, drums.
Yeah, I've had similar. I've had like 2 or 3 people that have played that music with me for the last few years, so I haven't called anybody for it yet.
Oh.
But it's gonna be it's like acoustic versions of my stuff, which is jazz, but it's got like usually some sort of a backbeat type of vibe to it. But I like the acoustic vibe. It's very organic.
Yeah, that's cool. I haven't been there yet.
You're not going to play a synth or shit there. It doesn't make any sense.
Thanks for doing it, man. We're good.
For sure.
All right, there he is. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Sam Barsh. I appreciate him taking the time. I love what he had to say about creating opportunities for other musicians. That's something that's important to me as well. And I'm glad he's still thinking about the community like that. That's really cool. He's a stand-up guy, that Sam Barsh. He's a stand-up guy. In other news, you can now subscribe to the Bay Shed newsletter by texting the word SHED to 66866. SHED, the word SHED, 66866. Should I plug it one more time just to kind of be an a-hole? Text the word SHED, SHED, to 66866. See what I did there? I slowed it down that third time just to make it a little bit worse. Yeah, that's all everything that'll be happening. The upcoming guests on the podcast, I'll be talking about via the newsletter and the new courses and all the stuff that's going to be added to the site. will all be coming out that way. So please do that if you're interested. And thanks for listening. Be good, everybody, and I will talk to you soon.